Hi, my name's Laura. Welcome back to Chapter Book Storytime from the Thunder Bay Public Library. Today we're going to be reading the third chapter of this book right here, The Hero's Guide to Saving Your Kingdom by Christopher Healy. It is an amazingly funny, super great book, as you know, if you've been watching along since we started a couple weeks ago. If you're new, I just want to let you know that we are going to start with just a brief recap so that you know where we're at. But if you'd like, you can also go back to the older videos. They're on our Facebook page under the videos tab. Or you can find them on our YouTube channel, and they're all there so you can catch up, watch the prologue and the first two chapters there. And then this one will be listed there too once it's done. Next week, we're going to, just for a change, we're going to go back, do another Choose Your Own Adventure book. So if you were hoping we would come do another one of those again, that's next week. We're going to do Choose Your Own Adventure. We're going to take a break from this book, go back to the adventure. I know you guys did such a good job of all your choices last time. I'm excited to see how it's going to go next week. But yeah, for right now, we're going to keep going with this book. Now, like I said, we're on chapter 3. So I want to just catch you up a little bit. There has been some introductions to our main characters. They're important to know. So basically, this book is going to feature all the Prince Charmings that you think you know from storybooks. Like, you know, there's Cinderella's Prince Charming, there's Snow White's Prince Charming, there's Rapunzel's Prince Charming, there's Briar Rose, Sleeping Beauty's Prince Charming, all these Prince Charmings wandering around. And as it turns out, they don't really like being called Prince Charming. They wish that people knew what their real names were. And this story is about them kind of trying to figure themselves out, go on an adventure, maybe make a name for themselves. Who knows? We'll have to see what happens. What's happened so far is we've met 2 of our Princes Charming. The first one we met was Frederick. Frederick is a really nice guy. He likes doing things like you know, going for picnics, or maybe he'd probably really like bird watching or taking you to a fancy dance, but he's not very brave, doesn't really like adventure, trying new things. That kind of thing makes him really uncomfortable. Now, he met Ella, that's Cinderella, at a ball, and it turns out that she really likes doing adventures and exciting things, which makes sense if you think about how she grew up, right? She was just a servant all the time. Of course she'd want to go out and have adventures. So even though she likes Prince Frederick, she kind of felt like she needed to go out and do some fun things on her own. So in chapter 1, that's what happens. Poor Prince Frederick, he loses his bride. Ella takes off, goes off to figure something out on her own. That's what happens in chapter 1, which actually is called Prince Charming Misplaces His Bride. Very sad. In chapter 2, Prince Charming defends some vegetables. We meet another Prince Charming. This is Prince Gustav. Now, he's the Prince Charming from the Rapunzel story. Now, Prince Gustav is a big tough guy, not like Frederick. He's got a whole bunch of brothers. Someone's asking me what the title of the book is. It's The Hero's Guide to Saving Your Kingdom. I'm sorry it's flipped on you. It is in the description of the event, which is happening. So it does say that it's The Hero's Guide, and it's by Christopher Healy. Yes, Prince Gustav. So Prince Gustav, he is a little bit full of himself. He thinks he's pretty great. So when he finds Rapunzel's castle in the forest, he thinks that he can save her by himself. Turns out, no, he can't. The evil witch gives him a boot out the window. He falls into a bunch of bushes, and he actually, this part's kind of wicked and painful, gets blinded by the shrubbery. I know, that's pretty wild. Well, then shortly after that, Rapunzel got away. We don't actually know how yet. That's coming up. But Rapunzel got away, found him wandering around by himself, crying, you know. He can't find anything to eat. He's all alone. He's blind. And then she felt so bad, she cried over him, and then his eyesight came back. Turns out Rapunzel has magical tears. Pretty awesome. So that's where we're at. We've got these 2 guys. We've got Prince Frederick, really brave. Prince Frederick, not really brave. The opposite of that. Very nice, but quite timid. And he's decided he's going to go looking for Ella. And then we have Prince Gustav, who's a little bit, you know, maybe full of himself, thinks he's pretty great. Didn't really appreciate Rapunzel's healing tears. He feels that people laugh at him, make fun of him because he didn't do a very good job of saving the princess, and in fact, she had to save him. So he doesn't like that very much. So we've got those two hanging out. So we have to see what's going to happen next. We've got another chapter. If you saw in the description, this one's called Prince Charming Claims He Is Not Afraid of Old Ladies. We'll see. We'll see if he is afraid of old ladies or not. There we are. Prince Charming. Over the years, Frederick had met his fair share of other princes. None of them were anything like this Prince of Sturmhagen. Gustav was so gruff. He had no patience, no manners, and ridiculously poor communication skills. No patience, no manners, bad communication. That doesn't sound like a good person to go on a road trip with. And that's what these two are doing, right? Riding their horses through the woods together. Frederick could only presume the man's flamenco dancing was just as awkward. He wasn't at all surprised that Gustav hadn't been able to hold on to his relationship with Rapunzel. But considering his own fiancée had run off, who was he to judge? As the two princes rode across the countryside in search of Ella, Frederick began to grow frustrated with Gustav. For one thing, the big man always insisted they camp outside. Have you ever camped outside? Or gone and slept outside? It's pretty fun, actually. But, Frederick, he doesn't really seem like a camping kind of guy. Anytime Frederick suggested they look for an inn, Gustav would respond with bah, or sometimes pah, or even pfft. Not very polite either. Every night, Gustav would contentedly sprawl out on the bare grass and then mock Frederick, so he's mocking, teasing him, for attempting to curl up on a trio of spread out handkerchiefs. That sounds like a pretty tiny little bed. Cleanliness, Gustav, Frederick would say defensively. I'm doing what I can in the name of cleanliness. Dirt, of course, ranked 4th on King Wilberforce's list of enemies of the nobleman, just below nose hair, but above hiccups. That's Frederick's father, King Wilberforce. He's very, the things he thinks are important are kind of silly things. Like, staying away from dirt. That's not really a real enemy. Sometimes dirt's pretty fun. As the days rolled by, Frederick also began to doubt Gustav's skills as a tracker. He watched Gustav sniff the air, cup his hand to his ear to listen to the wind, and occasionally dismount from his horse to nibble the edge of a leaf. He couldn't imagine how any of that would help them locate Ella. And in reality, none of it would. Gustav had no idea what he was doing. Eventually, Gustav took them off-road into the thickest stretches of Sturmhagen's pine forests, where the trees were so tall they blocked almost all the sunlight. Have you ever been in a forest like that? Every flutter of a bird or skitter of a mouse made Frederick flinch and drop his reins. The path was nearly non-existent, and he and Gustav had to squeeze their horses between trees to get by. More than once, Gustav pushed aside a large branch and let it snap back into Frederick's face. That is not a nice thing to do. I don't know if you've ever walked through a lot of wood where there's a bunch of branches. If you move a branch, let them walk by. Don't smack it and they'll just hit them in the face. No wonder Frederick doesn't really enjoy traveling with Gustav. Hours later, they finally spotted shafts of daylight ahead. Aha, Gustav said. He stopped his horse and hopped down. Now I know where we are. Now? Frederick asked. You mean we've been lost all this time? Look there, Gustav said, pointing out into a small clearing beyond the trees where they could see a solitary stone structure. Any guesses what that could be? A solitary stone structure? That's pretty fun to say, actually. Solitary stone structure. That's Zubera's tower. Zubera, is that the witch? No, she's some other old lady who has a tower in the woods, Gustav quipped sarcastically. Joked, as he rolled his eyes. This is where you lead me? Frederick asked in disbelief. To one of the most dangerous places in Sturmhagen, and the one place that Ella is guaranteed not to be? This is the tower that Rapunzel escaped from. Why in the world would Ella come here to look for her? Gustav ignored his protests. Let's check it out, he said, stepping into the clearing. Frederick grabbed the bigger man's arm and yanked him back into the trees. What if the witch is there? Frederick asked. Witch, are you there? Gustav called out. He paused for a second, waiting for a response. She's not there. Let's go. He stepped into the clearing, and Frederick pulled him back once more. Wait, Frederick said. This witch, Zubera, she's pretty powerful, right? She's an old lady, Gustav tossed off. I'm not afraid of old ladies. Are you? There's that chapter title. Ones who can pick me up and throw me. Yes, Frederick said, which is, smart. You should probably respect of which an old lady who could pick you up and throw you. I would. Look, Gustav says, here's all you need to know about Zubera. Here's where we learn about Zubera. Zubera was possibly the most powerful witch in the world. She hadn't always been, though. There was a time when she wasn't even evil. Zubera was just a farmer woman living by herself in the small town of Georgsburg. She was a dabbler in the magical arts, just as every member of her family had been for generations. But she never used her talent to do anything more than grow the tastiest turnips the world has ever seen. I wouldn't think that that's a very exciting thing to use your magic on, but hey, maybe she just really loved turnips. Still, the magic freaked out her neighbors. Despite her many attempts to befriend her fellow Jorgborgians, Zubera was always ignored, or worse, mocked. And again, that means teased. Not very nice. One particular group of local children used to stand at the edge of her property and call her names like Worm Lips and Hedgehog Hair. That sounds very nasty indeed. Discouraged, Zubera gave up and retreated to her cottage to live the life of a hermit. A hermit is someone who lives all by themselves and they don't ever see people. Then came the fateful day when one of the local hunters managed to capture one of Sturmhagen's giant fire-breathing beavers. A giant fire-breathing beaver? You probably thought I was going to say dragon. No, just a giant fire-breathing beaver. I'm glad we don't have any of those around here. The man brought the creature back to town to show off his catch. Big mistake. The beaver broke loose and went on a rampage, setting nearly every home in Georgsburg ablaze. As the fire raged out of control around her, Zubera projected a magical force field around her farm, keeping herself and her home safe from the flames. But she noticed a trio of children trapped by the flames, the same children who insulted her daily. Zubera dropped the shield around her home and protected the children instead. She lost everything she'd worked for, but, she thought, at least the townspeople would finally appreciate her. Suddenly, a hero arrived. The armored Sir Lindgren galloped into town on his white stallion and quickly slew the beaver. That means he killed the beaver. Not very nice. The beaver didn't ask to be brought into town. He then rode up to Zubera and told her to release the children. Confused, she dropped her shield. Sir Lindgren scooped up the kids and rode away. As the town began to rebuild and people returned to their homes, the townfolk didn't thank Zubera. In fact, they shunned her more than ever. Shunned is a fancy way of saying ignored her, basically. And then she caught wind of a new bard song. And remember, we learned that bard songs, that's how people got their news in those times, through songs and stories. And now there's a new one called The Ballad of the Knight and the Beaver, in which the hero knight not only slays the beast, but rescues 3 children from the clutches of a wicked witch. That's not what happened, but that's what the story is. It was at that point that something in Zubera snapped. Fine, she thought. If they want a villain, that's what I'll give them. She got her gnarled hands on some ancient spell books and taught herself some dark magic. So no longer is she just growing really great tasting turnips. She's going all out. Fine, you want me to say mean things? Say that I'm a witch? I'll be a witch. She wreaked havoc on the town. She used fireballs to blast down every cottage that had been rebuilt. She tore up gardens with sorcerous winds. She shot bolts of mystical lightning at the very children whose lives she'd saved earlier, sending them running, screaming, and crying. Everyone fled, and no one ever returned to Georgsburg. She cleared out the whole town. Zubera had gotten a taste of what it felt like to be truly feared, and she wanted more. The whole world should be trembling in fear of her, she thought. She'd heard about other witches that had become notorious for deeds that weren't even remotely impressive. Putting someone to sleep? Pfft, so unoriginal. Trying to cook a couple of kids? That didn't even require magic. Do you know who she's talking about? That's the witch from Hansel and Gretel. I guess she isn't using magic, but I'm not surprised she'd get famous for that. That's a pretty terrible thing to do. No, Zubera deserved to be even more infamous than all of them. She needed word of her wickedness to spread across the kingdoms. And for that, she couldn't rely on a couple of sizzled kids. She'd need to go big. She'd need to get the notice of the bards. Remember, they're the ones who tell the stories. So if you want something, everyone to know about something, they need to know it first. On the day she caught a wandering peasant swiping some turnips from her newly replanted garden, she came up with the perfect plan. Instead of simply frying the man where he stood, Zubair offered to let him go in exchange for his young daughter. The peasant was surprisingly quick to agree to this. He was not a very good dad. And that was how Zubair ended up with Rapunzel. The witch locked the girl away in an impenetrable tower and then waited gleefully for some heroes to try and rescue the fair maiden. An impenetrable tower means a tower that it would be impossible to break into. So now she's got Rapunzel locked up. She's waiting for a hero to come rescue her. She knew they would come. Heroes just can't stay away when they hear about a person in danger. Heroes crave the glory that gets heaped upon them when they pull off a rescue. Oh, how Zubair hated heroes. And when some stupid hero showed up to storm her tower, she planned to blast them into nothingness. The levels of pain and destruction she would cause would simply be too great for the bards to overlook. But no one came. Rapunzel's father never sent anybody to try and get his daughter back. He never even told anyone that she was gone. Like I said, he was a very bad father. That is a terrible father indeed. He just sat home and enjoyed his stolen turnips. What a guy. Years went by, during which Zubair was stuck with a prisoner she never really wanted. But the witch used her time wisely, learning every terrible magic spell she could. A spell to bind her enemies. A spell to grant her superhuman strength. Even a thesaurus spell to help her think of new and creative ways to insult people. Wow, I have to say, a thesaurus spell? That sounds awesome. I'm sure that you've used a dictionary before, right? That's the word that you use when you're not sure what a word means. You can look it up in a dictionary and find out. Well, a thesaurus, if you didn't know, that's a word that lets you find out other words that mean the same sort of thing. So remember I said impenetrable fortress would be a fortress that no one can break into. You'd find a word like that in a thesaurus. Pretty awesome magic spell, I think. Very, very cool. Maybe that's just me, though. You might think another magical school might be. Magic spell might be more exciting. This is how you can tell I'm a librarian. It's the word spell I find exciting. Before long, she was a master of dark magic. Then, one day, out of the blue, she got the rescue attempt she was hoping for. Sort of. Who would that be? Remember, we know who came to rescue, who tried to rescue Rapunzel. That was Gustav. One of the lunkhead princes of Sturmhagen tried to attack her, and she made quick work of him. She really did. She just chucked him out the window. That was the end of that. But the fool had come alone. There was no one to share the story of how Zubair had destroyed the prince. No one except Rapunzel, that is. Desperate for fame, Zubair set Rapunzel free to tell her tale. That's how Rapunzel got out. Nobody had to rescue her. The witch was just like, ugh. Go and tell everyone what a good job I did of throwing that prince out the window and getting rid of him. I don't think this was actually a very good plan. She never considered the possibility that the long-haired lass Rapunzel would save that near-dead lunkhead and become the hero of her own story. After the song of Rapunzel became popular, the song in which the bards made the witch sound incompetent, that means not very good at doing anything. She sounds incompetent by implying that Rapunzel escaped on her own. Zubair was more determined than ever to prove her wickedness to the world. She also now had a vendetta against heroes, which we knew she didn't like before, and bards. She doesn't like them now either. The witch spent weeks concocting her supreme scheme for infamy. Instead of kidnapping one prisoner this time, she was going to kidnap 5. And she was going to go after captives that people would actually miss and want back. Prisoners that the world's heroes would be climbing over one another for a chance to rescue. She was going to snatch the bards themselves. If you've been listening carefully, you might have noticed. In the last couple of chapters, there were a few times when the bards in the different kingdoms were referenced and people would say, I don't know where they got to. Well, now we know. Zubair has been kidnapping them all. And that's what she spent the past few weeks doing. She didn't worry about anybody getting wise to her plan before she was ready. There was no communication between the kingdoms. And without bards, who was going to tell the people that the bards were missing? It's a pretty smart plan. Sturmhagen, Harmonia, Orinthia, Avondale, and Silvaria. When the heroes of these 5 kingdoms hear that I've got their beloved loot pluckers, they'll come running, the witch thought. And when they arrive, they'll bear witness to the grandest display of evil power this world has ever seen. No one will ever ignore Zubera again. Of course, Gustav didn't tell any of that to Frederick. Gustav didn't know any of that. What Gustav said to Frederick was, "She's an old lady, end of story." That's not a very good description of Zubera at all. Gustav strolled cockily out into the clearing with Frederick quivering behind him. As it turned out, someone had heard Gustav shout after all. A girl's head popped out of the tower's lone window, some 60 feet above the ground. "Who's there?" "Ella!" shouted. As she looked down, she was stunned to see her fiancé. "Frederick, is that you? What are you doing here?" "Ella!" Frederick squealed with delight. "Oh my goodness, it's you! I came to find you." "You did?" Ella said. "Wow, you did? You're really here." "Okay, this is it," Frederick thought. "Time to show her what you've got. It's the all-new me, Ella. I've slept on dirt. I'm ready for adventures now." Frederick couldn't see Gustav behind him, but he could feel his eyes rolling. "How'd you get up there?" Frederick called. "It's a long story," Ella said. It's not really a long story. Here it is. Ella rode into Sturmhagen. It took her 2 days to cover the distance that Frederick traveled in a week, and visited a village where she hoped to gather some information about Rapunzel. "Do any of you happen to know Rapunzel?" she asked a group of townsfolk strolling down the street, and then tried unnecessarily to jog their memories by singing a few bars. "Listen to your hearts to the tale I must share, the tale of a girl with very long hair." It's not really a great song, I have to agree. Zubera, out in the prowl, slunk by at just that moment, pondering a cleverly theatrical way to spread news of the bard's kidnappings. It might be a poetic touch, she thought, to snatch a passing minstrel and use him or her to sing about the crime. And when Zubera saw some loudmouth in a dress singing to a crowd on a street corner, she figured she'd found her minstrel, only it was really Ella. As soon as the crowd dispersed, that means they cleared out, everyone went away, the witch sidled up to her. "Get your facts straight, you chuckle-headed throat warbler," Zubera spat. Then she trapped Ella, who was utterly baffled, that means she was completely confused, in a binding spell and took her back to the tower. See, that wasn't that long a story. "I'm so glad you're here," Ella said. "Please, go get help before the witch comes back." "No, we're not leaving without you," Frederick yelled. "Who's that with you?" Ella asked. "Oh, this is Rapunzel's prince. He helped me find you, and he can get you down. He's got experience with this." He turned to Gustav and asked her quietly, "How do we get her down?" Gustav walked to the base of the tower, looked to the window above, and yelled, "Cinderella, let down your hair." Ella looked perplexed. "But it only comes down to my shoulders." She doesn't have Rapunzel's super long hair. Uh-oh, it's not going to work. Gustav walked back to Frederick and shrugged. "That's all I've got. I'm out of ideas." Frederick was befuddled. "Well, there must be some way up there. I mean, she got up there." He called up to Ella. "How did you get up there?" Ella glimpsed something out of the corner of her eye. "Run! She's coming!" Frederick and Gustav darted under the cover of the nearby trees. They saw a tall, thin woman draped in red and gray rags emerge into the clearing. That's something I don't get. If you're a witch and you have power, why would you wear rags and old clothes? Why wouldn't you wear nice dresses and fancy stuff you wanted to wear, like maybe like a really cool cape? For some reason, this is one of those witches who's just wearing old rags. Her pale skin was creased and lined, and tufts of white hair shot from her head in random directions. "Zubera?" Frederick asked. Gustav nodded. "Let's watch and see how she gets up there. That's actually a pretty good plan." With a voice like broken bagpipes, I can't even imagine what that would sound like, the witch yelled up to Ella in the tower. "I could have sworn I heard you talking to someone, dearie. When I get up there, I had better find you alone." Then she turned towards the woods and called out, "Reese!" Soon there was a large rumble. Branches shook and leaves fell as a man taller than the tower itself. Wow, that's really tall. Because we already knew that the tower was 60 feet tall. So he's taller than that? Wild. Very tall. Very tall man. Muscled his way through the trees and stomped into the clearing. The giant, it's a giant, reached Zubera in one enormous step, then knelt and placed his hand on the ground, palm up, for the witch to climb onto. He easily lifted the old woman up to the tower window, and she stepped inside. Well, I'm surprised. I thought maybe like there was some stairs inside, or she had like a ladder up against some tree. I did not expect there to be a giant putting her in. I don't know if that's going to work for Frederick and Gustav. We can't get in that way, Frederick says. He agrees with me. That was when Gustav went berserk. That means he went crazy. He whipped out his big double-bladed axe and ran into the clearing with a long, thundering shout of "Sturmhagen!" The giant, dumbfounded, simply stood and stared. So did Frederick. How do you think this fight's gonna go? I mean, we've seen Gustav get in a fight with an ogre. He didn't do very well. Now he's fighting like a giant that's probably even tougher. I don't know. I don't know how this is gonna go for him. Gustav slammed his axe into Rhys's humongous shin. It's not a bad start. With a bellow of pain, the giant grabbed his injured right leg and began hopping up and down on his left foot. The ground trembled with every hop, causing Gustav to tumble over himself. He dropped his weapon as he fell, and the heavy axe blade plunked down into the loamy soil. From the trees, Frederick watched in horror as his companion crawled to retrieve the weapon, unaware that he was directly in the shadow of the giant's enormous right foot. Gustav was about to be squashed like a bug. Think, Frederick told himself, what would Sir Bertram the Dainty do? The answer came to him. This is a book that he liked to read when he was a kid. The case of the ill-mannered milkmaid. Sir Bertram had to get the attention of a governess who was about to use the wrong kind of wine glass. Frederick could use the same tactic here. 8 years of yodeling lessons were about to pay off. Don't know if you've ever heard someone yodel before, but it is very noticeable. Frederick cupped his hands to his mouth and let out a long yodelay, 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 yodelay. Not gonna lie to you guys, that was a pretty bad yodel. You'd have to look it up maybe if you want to find a proper yodel. But that's my impression of Frederick's yodeling. Maybe he's bad at it too. Who can say? It worked. Nothing annoyed Gustav more than yodeling. As soon as he heard the trilly alpine melody, he glanced angrily at Frederick, who was frantically gesturing upward. Gustav dove out of the way just as the giant's big bare foot smashed down, and landed directly on the lost battle axe. "Yow!" Rhys bellowed, hopping in pain once again. Only this time, he couldn't keep his balance. The giant staggered backwards and collapsed into the stone tower. "Uh-oh," Rhys moaned. The entire structure wobbled, and a huge chunk of stone began to shower down. "Oh no," said Gustav as the tower collapsed into a pile of stone and clouds of dust. Another failure. And this time, there would be a song about how he not only didn't rescue the girl, but he actually killed her by accident with the collapsing tower. "Ella!" Frederick screamed. "This is my fault," he thought. "Ella is gone, all because I tried to be something I'm not. I should have listened to my father." But as the giant sat up and brushed away the loose bricks and stones that littered the clearing, he revealed an astonishing sight. Inside a shimmering green bubble of energy, the witch stood completely unharmed. And Ella was draped over her bony shoulder, alive and kicking hard. "A magic shield," Gustav said. Frederick nearly fainted with relief. "Rhys, you big oaf, look what you did," Zubera hissed. Rhys pointed a huge finger at the princes. It was their fault. The witch turned to see who Rhys was talking about, but Frederick had already hustled Gustav back into the trees. Hiding under a gorse bush, the two princes listened to Zubera. "Don't tell me you're blaming the bunnies, Rhys," the witch said. "No, ma'am," the giant said. "It was a couple of men. They were trying to get the girl." She didn't see them. She thought this giant guy was blaming a couple of rabbits for him falling down. No, it was those two goofballs, Frederick and Gustav. Gustav popped up out of the bush. "Put Cinderella down, old lady." Frederick leapt up onto Gustav's back and yanked him back down into the shrubbery. "See," Rhys said, feeling vindicated. "Should I smash them?" "Never mind those buffoons, Rhys," Zubera said as her thin, colorless lips curled into a smile. "Did you hear what they just called our prisoner here?" The witch grabbed a handful of Ella's hair and looked in her eyes. "Well, look at this," Zubera chuckled. "Forget the singing ransomgrams, Rhys. I've got a genuine celebrity for a hostage. Cinderella. This is going to require a much more spectacular announcement. Oh, this is going to be fun." Ella glared at her, unwilling to show the witch any fear. "But what if the heroes follow us, ma'am?" Rhys asked. "Heroes singular," Zubera replied. "One of them is a complete coward. And yes, the hero will follow us. That's what heroes do. We'll just be ready for him. When we catch him and his sidekick, you can grind their bones into bread." Sounds pretty gross to me, but you know, everyone likes their own thing. Yuck. "Now come." "Yes, ma'am," the giant intoned in his booming voice. "But bread made from bone sounds awful, you know." "See, he agrees with me." bread made from bones does sound awful. I didn't hire you to be a meal planner, Reese, grated the witch. Start walking. All right, the giant rumbled. Have you ever tried it? Bone bread, I mean. I can't imagine it tastes good. And you'd still need flour, no? Shut up, Reese, said the witch. She's not very nice to him either, is she? My foot hurts. Which makes sense, he stood on an axe earlier. Try wearing shoes. After a couple of minutes, their voices and Reese's thundering footsteps could no longer be heard. The princes crawled out from under the gorse bush. Out of habit, Frederick tried to dust off his soiled and torn suit, but quickly realized it was a lost cause. Okay, let's go, Gustav said. Go where? Frederick asked. You want your woman back, right? Gustav said. We're following them. Just to say, not a very nice way to talk about someone. Your woman. It's not his woman, that's Cinderella. He could call her by her name. No, said Frederick, we're not. I am not going anywhere with you. You nearly got Alec killed. You would have died yourself if I hadn't done something. You yodeled, Gustav snarled with contempt. At least I did something, Frederick returned. How could you not have noticed those horribly calloused toes looming among you? Gustav brought his face very near Frederick's, close enough for Frederick to feel his breath. I bet he could smell his breath too, and if I have learned anything about Gustav, I bet he doesn't brush his teeth and he has bad breath. Gross. Are you telling me that I'm not a good enough hero for you? Frederick tried very hard not to blink. Are you saying that I can't do this? Gustav hissed. That I can't rescue someone? That you, Mr. Silky White Pants, and Fancy Golden Dongle Dangles are better than me? His forehead touched Frederick's. No, Frederick muttered. He was only slightly less afraid of Gustav than he was of the giant. I'm not saying that at all. Of course I need your help. Gustav inched back. You did find Ella after all, Frederick went on. I'm sorry I underestimated you there. But this isn't just about finding a missing person anymore. This is a rescue mission, and a dangerous one, considering there's a witch and a giant involved. So maybe the two of us aren't enough. Maybe we could use a little extra help. Another set of hands, maybe. That's all. Gustav thought about this for a moment. I suppose it wouldn't hurt to have another swordsman at my side, he said. Someone with a little more experience in rescuing people from witches and monsters, perhaps, Frederick offered. Ha! Gustav laughed. Who are you going to get? That guy from Sleeping Beauty? It's the end of this chapter. What do you think? Are they going to get the guy from Sleeping Beauty? Yeah, that's what this book is all about. All the different Princess Charmings. That's who they're going to find next. The very next chapter, chapter 4, is called Prince Charming Loses Some Fans. We'll come back to this book in a couple of weeks, back again with chapter 4. But like I said, next week we're going to try again with a Choose Your Own Adventure book. So tune in, same time, 6:30 Tuesday night. We'll be doing that Choose Your Own Adventure where you guys get to decide which of the two options they give us we could choose. We had lots of fun with it last time, so I hope you'll join us for that then. If you'd rather just go back and you can watch us read through some more of the Hero's Guide, of course you can find those videos on our Facebook page, and they are on our YouTube channel as well, which is just TBPL at YouTube. And thank you again to Christopher Healy for permission to read this book. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you for joining me. See you again. Bye.